Welcome again at your service in Caris. Have you got a pen and paper or anything else to take notes? Please stop the video for a moment and go get something. Even if you don't use it, always have something there. I have just spoken for half an hour on Caris as an extension of a video that I've just uploaded. This is the 4th of January 2026. And I think I've said enough for the moment on Caris. It's something I've revisited many times because I keep learning more on it, and I'll do it again. I just know it. However, another thing I mentioned in that last video is doulos, which is the Greek word for slave. At best, it is bondservant. And bondservant, I'll explain this way, though I'll say don't quote me on it, because again, this is just something off the top of my head. A bondservant was pretty much a slave, but there was a slight difference. As by my memory, a slave is somebody you just owned straight out, 100%. You could sell them to anyone, you could do whatever you want. You owned them, your property. Whereas a bondservant is committed to you pretty much like a slave. However, you can't sell them because they still technically own their own life. If somebody who had no money, had basically nothing, came and they were starving, so they stole your cow and cooked it and ate for a week. And eventually they were caught and they were proven to be guilty and taken to court, and they're broke, they've got no money. So the judge says, you now own them for a year. They are your bond servant. They must serve you like a slave, do whatever you want for a year, but they still have their own freedom once that service is over. So they're a 1-year slave. So they are bound to you in like a slave bondage, but not a full slave bondage, was a bondservant anyway. And some slaves and bondservants can have pretty nice conditions. If we look at movies of the Civil War era or before, movies like Gone with the Wind, you'll have plantations and you'll have maybe 100 slaves out in the field working the crops. And then you have some slaves that might be doing a slightly better job, like painting the house. And then you might have some slaves that have a slightly better job, like working in the kitchen. Sure, it's hot, but they probably get better food and maybe some more breaks. And then you have slaves that have a fairly cushy job, which might be like waiters or maids, just some cleaning or something. You know, they don't have to face the heat, and their job is not too burdensome. and it's actually fairly pleasant. They get pretty good clothes. And then you have a butler. That butler is still a slave. You own that butler, but that butler is in a suit, and that butler gets to eat the same kind of food you'd get to eat. And that butler doesn't have to do the cleaning, and that butler doesn't have to do the cooking or the painting the house, or certainly not working the field, because that slave is treated very well. Doulos means slave, but it doesn't specify what kind of slave. So don't instantly assume it is somebody in bondage having to work the field. But whatever the role, it's still a person who is owned by the person that they're serving. Or even as a bondservant, they are owned by that person for a period of time. A bondservant, I believe, can't be sold. Again, I believe, because I don't have bondservant down, and I'm not going to look that up right now. Okay. Paul opened many of his letters to churches, like the Galatians, for example. I don't know if Galatians starts with this sentence, but I'll just say that book is, for example, because he wrote to the Corinthians, the Thessalonians, the Galatians, the Ephesians, and those are the books of the Bible called Galatians, Ephesians, Philippians, so on. Now, at the moment, I just clicked on my Bible software to open one of those. And okay, I just went to the first one of Paul's letters to the churches, which is Romans. The King James says, Paul, a servant of Jesus Christ, Paul, a servant of Jesus Christ, called to be an apostle, separated unto the gospel of God. Okay, separated is interesting there too. However, that's a really poor translation, because if I click on King James Plus, that gives me Strong's Concordance for every word. And it says, I click on servant, doulos is the word, and I'll use Strong's exact wording. Doulos from G1210, a slave, literally or figuratively, involuntarily or voluntarily, frequently, therefore, in a qualified sense of subjection or subserviency. Bondman, and he does add servant, but he's saying it's not a servant, as in, well, you pay me by the hour, and if I don't want to turn up to work, I'm a servant, I can have a sick day. That's not what doulos is. Doulos is a slave, literally or figuratively, involuntary or voluntarily, frequently, therefore, in qualified sense of subjection or subserviency. Now, even the voluntarily bit there means a voluntary commitment to slavery, as in, one of the things a person could do back in the day was, if you're a free person and your mother is a slave, you can say, I freely choose to replace her so that she's no longer a slave. I'll be your slave. That's volunteering to be a slave, but that volunteer is still a slave. So there is a voluntary aspect to it. but it's still 100% commitment. Paul, a Doulos of Jesus Christ, Paul, a slave of Jesus Christ. I am bound to God. I belong to God. I am owned by God. I am Doulos. You can't have two masters. You will be slave to one or the other. I can't quote the scripture that says that, and I'm not quoting the words exactly right, but Paul again wrote that. He was saying you're either going to be a slave to sin or a slave to God. Slave either way, choose one. I'm a slave to God. So if I talk of myself as a slave, please understand that firstly, that's no different to what Paul did. And secondly, I'm only just starting to understand that. I am bound to God from my commitment to God. I voluntarily gave myself to God to be a slave. But once I voluntarily did that, I'm committed. I belong to God. Not my will, but God's will. It's very hard to do, to take your own will out of things. I still act in my will at times, rather than God's will. And I want to get to a point where I am so in tune with God that basically everything I do at any time is acting in God's will. I'd love that. I'd love to be the 100% slave, the 100% controlled by God's will. Because when you understand it, you want it. When you understand the power and beauty and everything from being submitted to God 100%, you realize that slavery in itself is a form of freedom, because you're either a slave to sin or a slave to God. You can't have two masters. I've chosen God. Now, even though I'm talking about being a slave to God, are you thinking of the slave in the field again? Got to remember, there's other kinds and levels of slave. Even the butler in his beautiful suit is a slave. It's just some slaves are treated very well. Their service is not difficult, and they get rewards of good food, eating the same food as the master. When you're really committed to God and you're doing God's will, that's the kind of slave you are. Sure, you're a slave, but you're treated well and you're rewarded well. If you're committed to God, you're a slave either way. But the more you let God rule your heart and take yourself out of your heart, take your pride and ego and get rid of them, get away from them, take on the humility of God, the closer you are to the butler's role. The more you try and hold on to your own ego, your own pride, your own greed, your own whatever it might be, the me, the self, your own hurts, I've offended people in my messages, and I've offended people by saying, look, this group is about helping people to grow personally, but more so helping them find their call and train in that call and reach that call and launch into ministry. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean fivefold ministry. It could be serving someone else as a counselor or as an usher or whatever your call is. We're here to help you get there. And I've had people that one wanted to post a message from another ministry, which is slightly frowned upon. How many ministries are going to post my message on their Facebook pages? Basically, almost none. But, and it's not my ministry, it's your ministry as well, it's God's ministry. Who knows how long I'm going to be around to be able to do this anyway, and somebody's got to take over. So it's just a ministry that I've created that is God's ministry, it's yours. So, firstly, it was other people's material. Secondly, it was around about an hour and 3/4. I try and stop at less than half an hour because a half-hour message is a really long message. Ideally, if I can keep messages to 20 minutes, great. That's a good time. 15, well, ideally maybe add a bit, but don't fluff it up to add a bit. 25, okay, that's still good, but starting to get on the long side. Half an hour, and that's just extremely long. But this was an hour and 3/4. So I decided, okay, this is going to be taxing my time, and I don't want to have to sit there for nearly 2 hours just to see if something is worth keeping on the group that someone else put on the group that I now have to review to see how good it is. I'm already at a stage of going, look, it's breaking the rule of, it's not really a rule that you can't post other people's ministry, though as far as the group rules go, we encourage people to do their own messages and put them up. Create a message yourself and put it up. We're here to help you grow and for you to help everybody else in the group grow, to train you up in ministry. If you've got any information that can help them train up in ministry, give it. That's what it's about. But bringing in other people's external ministries, that's a different thing. So it's like, okay, there's a small room of acceptability there, but it's not really the goal. Anything over half an hour, that's frowned upon. But if it's really good, maybe a few minutes, sure. And then I very reluctantly started watching it. And the beginning of it was, it's hard to even remember now. It was really nothing. It was like the church notices or something. It was like, I think they were giving out awards or something. I don't recall. I'm just coming up with nothing kind of stuff, which I started to fast forward through because that went for like 10, 15 minutes. And then they started the main message and I started watching that, and I don't know how long I watched it, 5, 10. I doubt that I watched it 15 minutes. But I either had things that I was just going through my head as in, look, this is either unscriptural or taking a scripture a little bit the wrong way, or something that rubbed me the wrong way in God. And it was a matter of, no, it's outside the rules. I was willing to look at it anyway. And I put a note on it, a comment on it, saying that I don't recall exactly the words. It might even still be there. I don't know if I even ever took the thing off. Saying that posting this kind of material is not what the group's about. I didn't say what the group is about is you creating your own material and posting that, but yes, that's what it's about. But external material, no. Though, again, if it's really good, we can possibly squeeze it in. And I'm not saying squeeze it in for time. We've got lots of ability to put lots of stuff in, and we want you to put stuff in, but squeeze it in through the rules. But if it's out of the agenda in 3 different ways, time, external, and quality, all quite low, it was no, just again, look, it's outside the rules, so please let's not post this in future. That person got offended and left the group. Okay, all that to talk about how somebody got offended. Firstly, if I do something to offend you, please tell us, or if anyone does anything to offend you, please tell us. Let us try and fix that, or let us help you understand why and that there was no offence meant. However, it also says one other thing. Now, this person is a good Christian. I don't know them myself, but they have a good Christian relationship with somebody I trust that tells me that they're on fire for God in the right way, etc. However, the fact that this person was offended rings alarm bells for me. You can't offend me. Well, only if I do maintain that little bit of pride which isn't supposed to be in my heart, because I am Doulos. I don't belong to men. I belong to God. So if somebody says that I'm a nasty person, it's like, tell God. I'm just trying to do what God says. Complain to God about me being a supposedly nasty person. I'm not going to get offended about it because my ego is not hurt. You can't hurt a person's ego who is desperately trying to take their own ego and self out of their heart and allow God to fill their heart 100%, not 99%, and just keep that little bit of ego, that little bit of pride, that little bit of self that can be hurt. Please understand that being offended, I can't see anything other than your pride being hurt your ego being hurt. Otherwise, you wouldn't be offended. If it's water off a duck's back, so what? You're not offended. If some child came up to me and said, "You're a really nasty man," it'd be, yeah, sorry, I'm not offended. In fact, look, I can't tell you about God. God loves you. Doulos, another fairly incredible word. Another word that, if you get into it, is quite deep and meaningful. My time's getting up, running up, because again, like always, I really want to try and keep everything under half an hour. I am bound to God. I belong to God. I am owned by God. I am Doulos. I am a voluntary slave of God. Wow, Paul said an amazing thing merely by saying, I am Doulos of Jesus Christ. Made me look at it and go, what kind of commitment is that? It's 100% the kind of commitment that God doesn't request. No, God doesn't request that you sort of serve him, maybe, if you want. It's a demand. You serve the world and sin and yourself and ego, or you serve God. 100% giving yourself to God to be owned by God. And the more you move away from the self and the ego and the worldliness, the more you're moving from the field slave to the butler slave, where you're almost as good as the master. You're treated really well. God treats me well. Not that God has to treat me well. God, even me saying God treats me well, might, for all I know, challenge God, and God might say, well, I'll show you for saying that. I don't know. I don't think so. But I am honoured to be a slave of God. I am honoured to be Doulos. A slave of the world is a dishonour. Which is the other choice? A slave of God is honourable. I hope you got that. I hope you know where I'm coming from. Please, if you like these messages, forward them on to people. Post them on your group. Copy them and post them, and add a little message saying, this is good. Watch it. Or, if it changes your life, it changed my life, whatever. And so, and put comments saying, join the group. Encourage people to join. The more we have joined, the more God can get out of this. The details are at the bottom of the screen. Bless you. Govern well in Caris.